you're your longest investment. We invest so much time into our business, our family. Don't forget, like, if you're not around later in life to see all those investments that you're putting in, like, now's the time to start investing in yourself and taking that 15 to 25 minutes to just start.
Welcome to the Head Smack podcast, where we have candid conversations with misfits and mavericks, those not afraid to stand up and stand out, the dreamers and the doers, the ones who've stumbled, fumbled, and then soared. Here we delve into the inspiring journeys and pivotal aha moments that have shaped their worlds. And maybe through sharing their adventures, you'll get hit with a head smack that'll change your destiny. Hey, welcome to the Head Smack podcast. My name is Povolni, and I'm excited to have another misfit with me. Amanda Nigg is a trailblazing founder of FarmFit Training. She's certified by NASM as a personal trainer, nutrition coach, wellness coach, and running coach. Amanda is dedicated to enhancing the physical and mental well-being of the agricultural community, guided by the philosophy that life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond. Amanda is on a mission to build strength and resilience in the agricultural sector. Amanda, welcome. Glad to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
That's quite a niche and quite a sector that you have leaned into. So I want to hear the story of how you ended up there by sharing a little bit about your origin story. How did Amanda get started, and how did she end up in health and fitness to do with the farming community?
Well, I grew up in Western Nebraska, which, let's be honest, Nebraska is very agriculture in the western side of the state. We call it the Panhandle, but I guess you can't call it the Panhandle because, like, Texas has a Panhandle, so does Oklahoma. It's like where you at. But I grew up in Western Nebraska in a small town called the Lions, and it was very so much like you were in the railroad or you were in agriculture. Those were the two biggest industries. So I grew up around agriculture, but I wasn't in agriculture. My dad actually worked for the railroad. My mom worked for UPS. And then I went to college at the University of Wyoming. And so I loved it. It was a great start to my adventures. But what got me to South Dakota was actually a medical degree, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So I
Wow.
have a degree in radiation therapy. So I do nothing with it, obviously.
But what drew you to that? You know, you said that there's two options where you're from. What drew you to medicine?
Well, medicine was always my starting point because, like, I love the fact of help. I'm a helper, I'm a fixer. So my personality is I love to fix things or solve issues that are not solved. And oncology is a field where a lot of people don't understand it. And there's so much to it where you can really dive into like different types of cancer, like how they like every I'm going to say this and somebody's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but like everybody has the cancer bug. Like we do, like certain events will trigger it to become active and it doesn't play favorites. Doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter your lifestyle. It doesn't matter. Like there could be a guy that can chain smoke every day in his life and never get cancer. And then there can be a healthy individual all of a sudden going through cancer treatments, and having a stage 4 cancer. So it just doesn't pick favorites. And that was an industry that really drew my attention. My grandpa, who is my role model, he's not with us anymore. He was my light. He actually was diagnosed with lung cancer, never smoked a day in his life, but he owned a plant. So, like again, certain events can trigger it to be active. And so that's actually what started my quest into oncology is I was like, I want to understand this better. Like, I want to understand like how it forms in the body, like how they treat it. Because like the medical field's always changing. And that
Right.
really drew my attention. It was like, okay, I want to understand this a little bit better. So like when somebody in oncology, I can be that person to like tell them what's happening and be that solution and that problem, not problem, but solution to help them go through it. And, when I graduated in oncology, um, I moved to South Dakota, and my first case was a 4-month-old baby, and I
Oh,
was
my.
not ready. Fresh out of college, 25 years old, no kids of my own, not married, and I was in pediatric oncology, and it was just like, ooh. It was like all of a sudden I'm treating this infant and this family because it's like
Wow.
you're trying to explain the process to this family and get them to understand what's happening to their child. And it was just like I couldn't emotionally relate, I guess you could say. So I kind of used to step back from that and actually sold insurance, believe it or not.
Wow.
That's health insurance. So I sold supplemental insurance door to door. which is the hardest sell you will ever do in your life. Like, you got second to make an impression, like 5 days, that's it. And so, I actually did that for 11 years, believe it or not.
Wow. Door to door, or did it move to
Door to
something
door.
else?
Well, I later in life, later in my, insurance realm, I ended up going to business B2B. Uh,
Yeah.
but I started out door to door and I loved it. I would roll up on farms. Here I'm a small town girl, so I'd roll up in buck boot and there's a farmer and a tractor and I'm like, "Hey, let me help you." Like, I'm here to show you some insurance that will protect you. And the reason I loved it so much is because I'm a fixer, so I was still helping them. I was giving them a solution that if they went through like cancer, heart, or an accident, where the insurance company I worked for at the time called Family Heritage, we would give money directly to the individual. So it gave them an opportunity to focus on their health instead of the expenses attached to it. Because like anything in the medical field, like when you go through like a big accident or cancer, that's like a 6 months to a year process. Like, it's not something that you fix right away or even a heart attack. And so it allowed these individuals to go get the quality care they wanted instead of the quality care they could afford. And so I really flourished in that. And that's actually how I met my husband, believe it or not, on a
All
rural.
right. You just rolled up at his farm and in your boots and offered him insurance?
No. Um, well, that would have been the perfect story.
Yeah, because that's like a Hallmark movie, like,
No, one of my clients, was their agriculture family, and he set me up on kind of a blind date, as you can say. Um, I was taking over the territory, and I had to introduce myself to the existing clients in Family Heritage, and he was already a client. He added our cancer policy, and he's like, "There's this young, hot, single farmer. You need to meet him." And I'm like, "I am not looking for a date or anything." And so I ended up introducing myself to him and he tricked me. He tricked me. So he was like, I was at the time where I was moving from big town Sioux Falls, South Dakota to a smaller town because I had so many cancer claims that I wanted to be closer to my clients. And I was looking for a trailer and I was like, okay, I need to find a trailer. And I reached out to this young single farmer and I was like, hey, I'm Amanda. Like, I introduced myself. I was telling him that I'm taking over the territory. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of looking for a trailer. And he's like, well, if I help you find a trailer, you have to go on a date with me. Oh, I was like, okay. They're like, sure, I'll go and see it with you. And every farmer, let's be honest, like has a trailer. What farmer does not and so, yeah, he was just like, I have a trailer, and how does next Thursday sound?" I was like, "Crap. Okay. I'm gonna post next Thursday." And it was funny too, because I rolled up on our date wearing, like, stiletto heels. Because you have to understand, I was destined for the big city, like, that's where I wanted to. And so I remember rolling up in these red stiletto heels, and he's just like, "I don't know who this girl is, but I gotta get to know her." And yeah, after our first date, we had a couple more dates, and I was like, "Yeah, this guy's going nowhere." I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm here."
Yeah, that does sound like a Hallmark movie. The big city girl rolls up to a date with a farm boy in red stiletto heels. S so that led you back into the farming space, that once was part of, like, everybody went into those areas, and suddenly you found yourself back into that. So, what happened next? So is that when you stepped away from insurance and started,
Nope.
uh
I kept insurance, so I still did insurance. I went on a couple dates, well, then we ended up dating, and shortly after I did move in with him. It was quick. It when later in life you meet that person, it's just like, it makes sense. Like, when you meet that person, everything flows perfectly, and so, I remember one of his tests for me was he had me get in this quad track. I think it was like a 500 or 520 quad track, Case IH quad track, and he was like, "I'm going to explain how to drive it," because again, I didn't grow up in agriculture, but I'm
Yeah,
always up for a challenge, and
yeah,
so he's on the radio explaining how to drive this quad track that had these big, massive rollers on the back of it, because I was gonna roll
yeah.
soy. So what we do in agriculture, let me explain.
Shouldn't wow.
Yeah, it was quite the addition. Like, in agriculture, we roll soybeans because we push the rocks down. Because when you harvest soybeans, you get so close to the ground that the combine will get caught on rocks. And so you have to almost like lay it super flat to be able to harvest soybeans in the fall. And so he's like, there was a storm coming and he's like, I need help. Like, I know you didn't grow up in ag, but I'm going to throw you into this tractor and you're going to roll soybeans behind me as I'm planting. And I was like, okay, whatever. This can't be too hard. And so I get in this quad track and there's like these buttons all over the place. And he's like, I need you to flick this button, do this button. There's the turtle and rabbit, for speed. And he's like, don't go all the way to the rabbit, go in between. And so I'm like doing all this stuff getting out into the field. Well, luckily the field wasn't too far from the farm. And I get out there and he's like, okay, now you have to unroll the rollers and follow behind me. And I was like, okay, I got this. He's like, well, I just want to tell you that this is the only field that is actually fenced. So don't take out the fence. And I was like, you're putting me in a field where and and the rollers are huge, and I'm like, "Okay, I got this, like, I'm gonna do this." So I get out there, I get it all unrolled, and luckily I didn't take out the fence, and I caught up to him and finished rolling this field, and we get back to the farm, and my husband will say, like, that's when he knew. He's like, "I gotta put a ring on this girl, like, she's going with making Poe. Uh,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, a year later, he proposed and 2 kids later, and, so insurance, I still sold insurance for the first part of our marriage. Like, there's so much to understand. Like, he typically, most farm wives, they do the bookkeeping and that kind of thing. Well, I quickly realized, like, that's not my thing. Like, there's so many codes when you're doing accounting work for farming and you have to put them in the right category, and that just being stuck in an office was not my type of thing. So I did keep up on insurance, but I did kind of back off to like barely part time because I wanted to be a hands on mom with our children and be an active role on the farm. And so like I always tell everybody like you can put me in any piece of equipment. Like I'm the perfect wheel turner. Like I could drive anything, but as soon as things break down, I'm out. If I can't Google it or YouTube it, like I'm out. So that was kinda like how it started, and then, I kept up with insurance, up until COVID, 2020, and then, I'm sure we'll get into that story, but things kinda changed once COVID hit and, kinda put a huge wrench, I guess, in, the direction I ended up going.
Yeah, so there's no more turning up at people's houses because
Ah,
you didn't do that anymore. And so, yeah, that changed for a lot of people of what you could do, especially people that their job relied on them meeting people and interacting with people and all of that stuff. So, did you totally stop insurance at that point? Like, when did the transition happen into pursuing things around mental health and fitness?
so, leading up to COVID, we did build our forever home, which was actually located half a mile south of the farm. So, he is the only, farmer, I guess, in his family because his dad died of brain cancer really young. And then his sister lives down in Oklahoma. So for him, he kind of took over the role of farming for his family. And when COVID hit, the day before the national pandemic, we were living in our forever home. Everybody was getting ready for the lockdown because, like, the next day, March 20th, we were locked down for 2 weeks. Um, I remember I was taking
What was the
um,
longest 2 weeks ever?
what ring like the whole year or 2 years. Great. Uh, but I was in the process of moving, taking my youngest to daycare because I still worked insurance part time. And as we're trying to figure out that transition into like being, you can't talk to anyone, like face to face contact wasn't recommended. And so I remember that morning, I was getting my youngest ready for daycare. I was really frazzled because I had a couple business meetings that were Zoom that I was going to give them a pitch for insurance, to offer to their employees. And I get to daycare, drop my youngest off at daycare, and I look at my phone and I had 8 calls from my husband. And when you get 8 calls from somebody,
Right.
like, ooh, like that gut feeling of something's wrong because
Right,
you don't
right.
call people that many times. And so I remember getting on the phone with my husband and he was like, hey, the house is on fire. You need to get home. And at the
Is this your
time,
forever home?
Our forever home, yeah. We just built it 4 years
Wow.
prior. We just built a
Wow.
dream home 4 years prior. It had everything we wanted. All the we poured our heart and soul into building this forever home. And, I remember thinking in the back of my head, like, "Is he serious? Like, is this really happening?" And
Wow.
he repeated himself, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, it's like our house is really on fire." And so, again, my fix it personality, I'm like, "I know where the fire extinguisher are in the house, like, I can put this out." And so I remember jetting home, and at the time, the daycare was 10 miles away from our house, so not far.
Yeah.
And I got home, and as I'm pulling down the driveway, I see the smoke, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna run in this house and put out this fire." And so I pulled up to the house, and I remember running up to the front door, and I hit this we had massive, like, cedar pillars in the front of our house, and if you're running full force hitting one of those, like, I flew back on my back. Like, it just,
Wow.
took completely out, and I was like, "Nope, I'm gonna go around back now." So I remember running around back, and by the time I got to the back of the house, the garage was gone. Like, we had a
Wow.
three-stall garage, and, at that time, I just kinda stopped in my tracks, and I'm like, "If I go in that house, I'm not gonna come back out." And then I finally at the time, my husband and my oldest were home, and they actually climbed out the master bedroom window, and so they were in the horse barn that was across the farm, our little farmstead yard, and I could hear 'em crying, and so I came back to the front, and I remember we waited 38 minutes, for the fire department, which in rural America,
Wow.
that's
Wow.
just a lot of time. Like, that's super quick. You have to understand, like, these are all volunteer firefighters. Like, it was 8 in the morning, so they more than likely were already at work, and they had to leave work, get to the fire department, load the fire trucks, change, get to our house, which was, 15 miles outside of the, small town that we live close by. So, like, 38 minutes, that's an amazing time. But for
Mhm.
me, like, in that 38 minutes, it's just like you're watching your
It's the longest time ever, yeah.
Oh my god, it was so long, and, like,
Yeah.
I mean, they started working on the house, trying to, like, stop the fire, and the next thing you know, another fire department showed up from another small town, and another one. We ended up having 5 local fire departments from small neighboring towns come to try to put
Wow.
out this house fire, and finally, I heard this excavator come down the driveway, and it just kinda, like, sunk in as, like, my house is completely gone. Like, there's
Wow.
gonna be nothing left. Like, they ended up collapsing it on itself because it's March, and so it's cold. There was still snow on the ground, and they were more worried, like, "Hey, we don't want this to spread into the neighboring field," which was our field, and, like, "We're gonna have to collapse your home on itself." It
Wow.
uh, and so
Wow. Was it a log home as well?
Yeah, so we had, some of it was mostly we had cedar post in the front, it was a wraparound deck. I mean, it was a big home. Like, it was,
Yeah.
I think, like, 3,800 square feet on one level, and then the basement matched it, and then we had a loft, and it was 18 feet or 18, pitch ceilings, so it was, like, 8 inside with, like, exposed beams and stuff. So it was kind of like a log home, but it wasn't. But what
Yeah.
really got us is we did the spray foam thing. And so I guess when you spray foam your home, it kinda acts like an insulator and,
Right. Right.
keeps all the heat in, and so it was one of the hottest fires they ever had to deal with because, like,
My goodness.
spread it all in the house, and so, they collapsed the home on itself, and that next day, it was like the national lockdown. So you couldn't
Oh
and
my
could go
goodness.
shopping. We couldn't get groceries, everything was shut down. And so it was
Wow.
like, what the heck are we gonna do? Like, how do we navigate this? And luckily we had amazing neighbors that showed up and would drop stuff at the door and then call us and be like, "Hey, I just dropped off a bunch of stuff for you guys." Small town America, just great neighbors, but I would have to say, like, I've never been mentally so low in my life. Like,
Wow.
it was that moment where it was just like, I didn't know what to do next. I'm homeschooling my children, which I can teach an adult any day, but you tell me to teach at the time as it was a 5-year-old and as almost 8-year-old. I mean, the math they're doing these days, that's the way. Like, it was just like
Common Core and all that stuff.
why can't we go back to the old way? It was great. what's this? So, I ended up I couldn't do my career. I couldn't sell insurance. I couldn't I was homeschooling our children and we're trying to social distance. At the time we're living in the shop because we had nowhere to go. So we're at half a mile to the north at the main farm. And so we're trying to figure out this transition and I just struggled. Really struggled
Yeah.
with my own identity, like what was next. And I remember, like, for me, I've always been very active. Like, I've been your competitor. Like, if you play any sports, I'm that person that you hate to play against because 'cause I'm so competitive. And so, like, in the fit
From Uno to sports, right? Like, don't mess with you.
there are games I'm even competitive. I don't let my kids play. And so, like, it was just one of those things where, like, for me, I just really emotionally was at my lowest point. Like, I didn't know what to do. For my husband, it wasn't nothing really changed for him. Like, he was still able to, go back to farming because, farming's a very solo job. You're in the tractor by yourself. So, like,
Right.
for him going into planting season, I mean, it didn't really change too much for him. But, like, for me, it just rocked my world. It was like I was trying to figure out all these next steps, and so I do have an associate's degree in health promotion, and I've been that mom, that gained 60 pounds in one pregnancy, had 2 C-sections. So, like, I've always been super physically active because I was diving into my own fitness journey from 2017, and my husband knew that. Well, my gym was in our house, and so he would go to our junk pile and bring me these like random pieces of equipment. Like we're talking old tractor tires, like weights from like tractors. And he's like, here, use this. Cause you couldn't get gym equipment. Like like because everybody's stuck at home. So everybody's in gym equipment. And so he was bringing me these random pieces of equipment to use. And so I started posting it online, believe it or not, on social media. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a tire flipping workout and I'm going to post this online. And I had people ask me, they're like, what are you doing? Whose program are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm kind of creating it, like
Yeah.
mine. And so I started posting these random workouts. Well, then in May of 2020, I was like, you know what? I'm not certified at this time. I got online, found this planking challenge because we know planking works the way
Right.
my body. Like it not only aligns your body, it helps your circulatory system boost your mood in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. So I did.
So explain to those that might be listening that don't know what planking is.
So when you get down on your elbows and you're extended out and you're engaging not only your core, your legs, your back, your upper body, you're holding your body weight in a position where you're holding it for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And the reason why it's a full body movement is because you're engaging so many muscle groups at the same time. And so, planking is one of the movements. It's one of those old movements that a lot of people forget to do that works your whole entire body. And I talked about a few of the benefits. It helps your circulatory system because you're holding this movement and you're engaging all your muscles all at once. And so it helps the flow of your blood in your body. It helps aligns your back because you're holding this position, engaging your core. So
Yeah. So it's basically like you're trying to keep a straight line. You're kind of like doing like a like a push up position that most people are familiar with, except you're on your elbows and your body is as straight as possible, and then you're on your toes, right? And so you just try and hold that straight line while you're on your elbows and on your toes facing the ground position, right?
yep, and you don't wanna move, so that's why it's one of those, movements where you're locked into that position and you're holding it. So you're holding all your muscles tight at the same time, and that's why it really works your whole entire body because you're engaging so many muscle groups in just that one movement. And it's
How long do you hold it for?
well, the plank challenge actually built up. So it started at, like, 20 seconds, and then at day 30, it went up to 5 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I put and like I said, I put this planking challenge together and I actually challenged a bunch of farmers to join me. I was like, I'm gonna just throw this out there and see if anybody wants to join me. I don't even know. I had 800, Paul. I had 800 plus. I don't even know
Wow.
the count of farmers across the world. I mean, we had people in Australia join, UK. it just went viral. Everybody was planking on like tractors, bison, so also sorry. Like it would but it opened my eyes. Like it's like, okay, everybody is bridging that gap between consumer and producer because agriculture is the industry that a lot of people don't understand. Let's be honest. Like they like, especially when people go to the grocery store, they instantly blame the farmers for the increase of food prices when it's not us. Like, we're still getting paid the same. It's your middlemen that are making all the money. And
Yeah.
like, and GMO, for example, a lot of people don't understand that. And so again, it was just one of those things where it was is giving the pe people a space to work on themselves, and it really opened my eyes into that, where it's like, okay, everybody on social media is doing a great job bridging that gap between consumer and producer, you know, agriculture and then what you buy in the grocery store, but nobody's really tackling the physical and mental health and bridging that gap. Because,
Yeah.
like, agriculture as a whole is an industry that's vastly improving daily. Like, I mean, they have believe it or not, Paul, they have self-run tractors that drive themselves, like, on a little remote control, like a video game. Like,
Yeah.
maybe we don't have I wish we did, that would be cool on tractor top and kill. But,
Right.
a lot of the manual labor side of things in agriculture is getting replaced by technology, which is a great thing. It
Right.
shows that our industry is vastly improving. It's like not only just vastly improving, but we're advancing when it comes to technology practices. Like
Yeah.
keeping up with the times and keeping ahead of it. With soil health and all of that. Where like back in the day, you used to have to pick up hay bales. Sorry, my dog's barking. Um, but we used to have to pick up hay bales and throw them on the back of the tractor. Well, not now they have a machine that will pick them up and do it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you do it. So, the physical and mental side of things of agriculture was going downhill,
Yeah.
and that's really where it opened my eyes. It was like, okay, nobody's approaching this. Like, nobody's talking about, working on yourself, physically and how it impacts your mental health as well. Like, if you
Yeah, I find it fascinating that, and I think that for somebody listening to this, it is a little bit of a head smack moment for them. Is when you think of niching, and you found this niche of health and fitness for farmers, and most people will think, "Oh my goodness, that's just so niche. Like, who's going to want to do that? Like, how are you going to find enough people to make a living or make any impact?" You said 800 people from around the world signed up for your first offer, and so you know be mindful of, when you're niching is, it might be a lot bigger than you think, um, if you lean into something that you're super passionate about. So I want to encourage somebody in that is when if you're looking at niching, you might be staying away from a niche that is actually has enough people in it that you can serve well and serve passionately. So give it a shot and kind of put it out there and see if it's a valid offer. And so that's amazing that you found that. And so you did this plank challenge, and what happened after that? What kind of led you to the next steps with the interest that you had from that?
Well, I loved it so much because, like, again, it was kind of my realm, again, fix it personality. Agriculture is the industry I live in. I
Yeah.
understood it because, like, at the time I was buried into it and, like, I really understand it. And so, um, I started doing a couple more. I did two more free challenges. So these were free challenges online that I did because at the time I wasn't certified, so I couldn't charge someone. And I decided I turned to my husband, and I remember telling him about my ideal of like, "Hey, I wanna become a certified coach, and I wanna tailor programs to people in the agriculture community." And like, agriculture is bigger than you think. Like, when we're talking agriculture, we're not just talking farm wives and farmers, we're talking people that work at John Deere, Case IH,
Right.
oh, Caterpillar. We're talking about the ones that work for industries that are within agriculture. And that's really big. Like, it's a big industry. We're truly the backbone of the world in any country because if you don't have a food system, if you don't have farmers, you don't I mean, there's not gonna be food in the grocery stores. There's not gonna be, there's not gonna be those, um, what is it, amenities is what maybe I wanna put there that we
Yeah.
take for granted. Now they can go to a grocery store and get avocados, you know, and avocado like, are grown in California or Mexico, so it's just like it was really cool and opening my eyes in that aspect. And so then I knew I wanted to be online because, small town America, like, I was like, I can't get enough clientele to make this
Right.
a flourishing business. And so I started doing this entrepreneurship of learning how to run a business online. And during that time, I went back and got certified as a personal trainer and nutrition coach. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start there and see where this takes me. And so then I remember the first day I opened doors, February 5th of 2021. So this is less than 10 months after our house burned down. Less than 10 months. I opened the doors to FarmFit Training. And I remember that just that feeling of like, is anybody going to trust me? Like, is anybody going to even apply? I had 60 applications in 45 minutes and I only
Wow.
beat
Wow.
by, so only 25 clients at a time because like they were one-on-one. But I remember my mentor at the time, she's like, like, don't be shocked if you get one or two clients in your first 6 months. Like you have to build up. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the fact that I had a full roster within 3 days was insane.
That's amazing.
And I loved it, and it wasn't just women too, like, I did have a lot of women that applied at first. I get it, a lot of men are not gonna hire a female coach, but now I would say I'm split down the middle, like, I'm 50
Yeah.
I have men clientele and women clientele across the world. I'm actually international, which is so, like, cool.
Wow.
So, yeah, open the doors, and then the rest is history, like, it just I love it. I'm
Yeah. Well,
oh,
what was that?
I said I thank God every day for,
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about your story too is the fact that you started using the things around you, when it came to the fitness. I mean, it was basically CrossFit, right? With, flipping tires, lifting random things, challenging muscles in new ways because it wasn't perfect gym equipment and all of that. And so I think that's amazing that, instead of saying, until I have X amount of tools or X amount of resources. Unless I have this, I really can't do that. Is you kind of made do with what you had at the time and made it work. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, we can sometimes get stuck in this place of until I have this tool, until I have that tool, until I have that equipment, until I have that person, until I have that thing, I can't do anything at all. And so you took what you had around you and made it work, and it became a part of your thing because that it also encouraged other farmers that might not have access to gym equipment, that might not have access to all the tools that other trainers might offer, but you have a way of helping them with the things that they have around, right? Is that still part of what you're doing, or has it migrated to something else?
No, 100%. It's still our motto. So, like,
Yeah.
when I was getting certified, I read this case study and I'll never forget it. In this case study, they took 100 people, 50-50. They split them right down the middle. And they gave this first group of 50 people, they gave them four movements, simple movements. Like we're talking deadlift, squats, like nothing, not a fancy movement. Cause I know there's so many fancy, like wall Pilates is out there. And I'm like, what the heck are wall Pilates? Like, what are we doing here? Like, basic movements, and they're like, okay, this first group, they're gonna have them work out 15 to 25 minutes. They're gonna go 4 rounds doing these four simple movements. And then they took this next group in the study, they took this next group of individuals and they're like, okay, you have to do the same four movements, but now we're gonna go for time, 45 minutes to an hour. And they over the course of the 3 month period, the group that had the best progress is the one that actually had the shorter amount of time, believe it or not, because they did progressive overload. And what that means is they challenged their muscles with heavier weight. So once they got comfortable doing 10 reps, for example, let's just say like bicep curls, they were doing 15-pound weights with bicep curls, they would increase their weight and, challenge their muscles, to grow. So what happens when you lift weight or do resistant training is you create these like, and I always do use this analogy. So your muscles are like this. And when you lift weights, you create this micro tear in your muscles. And that's actually what helps build and repair your muscles, especially when you couple it with a high protein diet. And so they notice that they put on more muscle mass. Well, muscle shreds fat faster. Our muscle skeleton is actually our biggest organ in our entire body. And so they were able to build muscle, shred fat faster, gain energy compared to this group that worked out 45 minutes to an hour. And so I took that methodology and I applied it to FarmFit Training where you don't need a lot of equipment. Like
Yeah.
you can use anything around your farm. And just like you said, a farmyard is like a CrossFit haven. You just take the
Right. Right.
and so like that's one of the things I still talk about is like, hey, if you're up in like I had a gal, for example, one of my first clients, she was one part of my OGs. She's still with me to this day. Crazy. Banana.
Wow.
Like out of the original 25, 18 of them are still with me to this day.
Oh, that's amazing.
Super cool. So she lived up in the middle Quadock, I don't even know, Canada. Like, Canada's massive. And her closest town to her was an hour and a half. And so when she applied for my program, she didn't have any weight. She was just like, I need to do something. So she actually grabbed buckets of oats and used them as for this, like at and my one-on-one coaching was 12 weeks. And how we adjusted the weight is we would add water to them. And then she put them on the cattle scale, get the measurements. So we know how much it weighed. I'm not making this up.
This is awesome. So it's not lifting chickens and then you're lifting, sheep, and eventually you're lifting a cow, right? This is
So
like,
But yeah, she would like feed them to the she would feed the oats to the chickens, say,
yeah,
"I'll eat," after it kind of got spoiled. But yeah, her transformation was huge because again,
that's
see,
amazing.
coupled nutrition with resistance training. And so like anybody that's out there looking for a fitness program, make sure it has both of those components. Like you're doing a resistant training program with nutrition and understanding nutrition and how to feel your body. Um, it was just a
So with the weights, you were saying that it's a matter of doing heavier things less times is better than doing lighter things a lot of times. Is that what you were saying? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
you have to challenge your muscles. So, like, if you're like, if, for example, Paul, if I approached you with a 25-minute workout, wouldn't you instantly pick up a heavier weight? You're like, I'm going to give this hell for 25 minutes, and then you go through your first set and be like, I could go heavier. Or, like, let's say you started super heavy and you're like, okay, maybe I need to drop down because I'm not going to make those next 3 rounds. Again, you're still challenging your muscles.
Right.
Like, if somebody approached you with a 45-minute workout, you're like, "I'm gonna go light because there's no way I'm gonna make that 45-minute mark," you know?
Yeah.
And so, a lot of times, a lot of individuals don't understand that, like, hey, in order to build muscle, you have to challenge them. You have to create those micro tears, and the only way to do that is to lift heavy. And a lot of women are like, "Well, I don't wanna lift heavy because I don't wanna look like a man." Well, that's one of the biggest myths. We don't have our chemical makeup is, totally different from a man. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way I'm gonna look don't get me wrong, there's some women on social media where you see them and you're like, I wanna fight her." Like,
Right. But they've really, really worked hard to get to that place.
yeah.
They didn't get there by mistake.
Yeah, there's something else going on there, but again, like, when you pick up heavier weight, you get for women, we get leaner, smaller, tighter, and you start to see that tone look that we're all after. And for men, again, your chemical makeup's a lot different. When you're pushing heavier weight, you're building that muscle. So you're starting to shred fat, see that muscle definition,
Right.
the arms. A lot of men want those chiseled arm and then, man chest, so it's a lot of beautiful things that come from that. And so I took those 2 methodologies, minimum equipment again, and I'm showing individuals, hey, like you don't need to have this huge, massive setup gym. It just little creativity and thinking outside the box, and you can achieve any result you want as long as you're disciplined and you're consistent.
Yeah. Well, kind of like you shared about the planking. What are some other things that somebody could start today that could start towards that health and feeling better? You said, the planking was like a full body
Yeah.
um, you know, activity. What are some other things that you've started people off with, especially somebody that might not have been doing that is new to this? What are some recommendations that you have?
I would always tell everybody to pay attention to water, for example. Water is another thing. Like, a lot of people don't realize, like, even a slight or slight 2% dehydration will affect your memory, your thinking, your cognitive skills, like everything. So, like, I always have every single client that comes into Firm Fit training, I have them drink a gallon of water. which seems like a lot of water. I get it. But I'm 5'1", a buck 25, and I get a gallon in. So you can do it. So, I always tell them, "Hey, do gallon of water, replace it with your soda because soda is so packed of, like, preservatives and sugar." You know,
Right.
if you're someone that's addicted to it, aim for your gallon of water first and then maybe have a pop or, Coke or whatever your guilty pleasure is, in that aspect. And then also protein. Like, obviously, like, eat protein first because, like, in today's society, if you look at it, everything's focused around food. Like, if you go to an event, there's always food. Like, you can go to a farming event, for example, in my case, and there's always vendors all over the place, selling food.
Right.
Or a family gathering, guess what? Food's there. It's just our society. Like, food is fast food chain restaurants are all over the place. And so when you go to eat your meal, or let's say you're going to eat lunch or dinner, focus on eating your protein first before you eat your carbohydrates. And carbs are like your breads, your pastas, your vegetables, any of that stuff. Just by making sure you're getting enough protein in a day will really change your body as well. And I can use an example. So my stepdad's a pilot. And I actually have been working with his nutrition finally. 4 years of launching my program, he finally can get. But he flies all over Colorado. So he's based out of Denver, Colorado, and he works for a company called Great Aviation, and they fly all over the place. And so I was talking to him about some high protein snacks to grab to help him, like tuna packs and, hard boiled eggs, great to get because he's at like different hotels in the morning. Because when they get to a
Right.
destination, have to stay at a hotel. We were going through all of that. And when I was talking to him about it, I'm like, you're supposed to be eating 1 gram per body weight of protein a day. And he's a big dude. Like, my stepdad's like 200 pounds. And we kind of calculated what he was eating in protein. And he was like, I'm not even close to what I used to be eating in protein. And so once we honed that in and got him like at least to 170 grams of protein a day, he's like, the first week completely sucked. He was like, I was grumpy. I was not having it. But he's like, he called me one day after church and he was like, my energy's up. I feel like my normal self again. He's like, I've noticed like my skin's starting to get clearer. Like, I just feel complete. And so a lot of clients that come into FarmFit training don't realize how much they undereat when it comes to protein. And that's one of those eye-opening things is like when you start to calculate it and start to track it, you're like, oh, I eat protein all day. And it's like, okay, like let's track it and see where you're actually at. And then when they find out, like, wait a minute, I'm not even close to half of what I'm supposed to be eating in protein. So I always tell them, make sure that, something simple you could do is like a plank that we talked about, a gallon of water a day, and then always eat protein first and make sure you have protein with every meal. So if you're going to go have a snack, like let's say you're going to have chips, like I'm all about, instead of subtract, add is the method I go about because like as soon as you tell someone they can't have a certain type of food, what do they crave? That's certain.
Boy, I think about right.
That's all the Cokie, I couldn't have chocolate, I'm gonna crave chocolate. So, instead of, like, taking it out of your diet, just couple it with protein. And then next thing you know, you're gonna start to make healthier choices because you're gonna start to look at nutrition differently. Because at the end of the day, we're all emotionally attached to food, even if we like to admit it or not. And so, just to get that, attachment away and start to view food as fuel, it
Yes.
changes your thinking and your mindset around it.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like most people are actually undernourished or under eating, um, and they don't even realize it. Like you mentioned, your stepfather thought that he was eating fine, but he was not eating enough protein. Do you think that, and with your also your agriculture background, is that we are not getting the amount of nutrition that we think we are, even though we think we're eating a lot or we're eating well because we're not eating the right things?
Yeah,
Is that
well,
correct? Yeah.
I would say so because, like, a lot of times, like, when you go to fast food restaurants, what's the first thing we gravitate towards? French fries, or something like that, and we're not thinking about the type of foods that we could be eating. especially when it comes to like protein. Like I'll be the first to admit, I always thought I was eating enough protein. And then once I started diving into it, it's like, wait a minute, I'm not actually feeling my body correctly. Um, and a lot of people don't understand the science behind nutrition either. And that's one of the things that we really educate on is like when you join FarmFit training, I'm going to actually explain what protein is, what it does to your body, like what are good sources of protein. Same with carbohydrates, like there's simple and complex carbohydrates. Like let me break them down and explain the difference between the two. Or when you get into fats, a lot of people avoid fats because they're like, oh, I'm going to gain fat because I'm eating fat. And it's like,
Because fat-free was such a big thing. Everybody kept talking about fat-free everything. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, well, when you actually understand fats, like there's three different types of fats. There's trans fats, saturated fats, and unsaturated fat. Let's explain the science and what they are so you will actually understand. And when people are armed with that knowledge, they actually start to make better choices for themselves naturally. And again, it's all about that education. And so like when someone comes into the program, I know they're not going to be with me for life. Granted, I do have 18 that have been with me since the get-go, but I want them to understand how to feel their body correctly and to really understand what they're putting in their body and what it does to the body. And so we really like to educate the science behind it. And really give them that knowledge to the point where they could be like a personal trainer because they understand it and they understand feel their body. And so we actually do something called macronutrients. Have you heard of that before?
I've heard the term, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so
So go ahead, explain it.
the word macro means large. So you're focusing on the nutritional value of foods in large amounts. So it's actually a nutrition theory. It's not a diet. Because a lot of times when we hear that word diet, we think of restriction, right? When you hear some on a diet, you're like, oh, they're cutting out food. Like they can't wrap. And that's just the notation, even though the word diet means nutrition profile, right? It's talking about all the food that you're putting in your body. And so I always tell everybody when they start the program, like macronutrients, it's not a diet. We're talking about a nutritional theory. So we're focusing on protein, carbs, and fats in large amounts to fuel our body and to really be able to function at the ultimate best. And that doesn't mean taking foods away. Like that means again, looking at it as a different perspective, like you can still have Oreos, like you can still have ice cream. I had ice cream last night, and it still fit into my nutrition. So you can still enjoy food, but you're looking at that nutritional values of like, hey, what am I going to gain from eating this food? And so you start to detach yourself emotionally from food and start looking at it as like, hey, how am I going to feel my body today? Like
Yeah.
I can make pork chops, I can make, a steak, I can make, and so you start to think of that way. And so a lot of times like fitness programs, especially nutritional coaches out there, will give you this cookie cutter program, right? Let's be honest. They'll give you like this meal guide and be like, you're eating rice for the next 6 weeks. What if people like chicken and rice? Oh, like it's worth your diet. And then two is what is that teaching you? At the end of the day, you're like, okay, I ate what they told me to eat and I lost all this weight and built all this muscle, but I still don't know anything about nutrition. And so how we approach nutrition is I give you meals. So I give you high protein meals. Like I have a recipe library of over 500 plus recipes, 1,000, I probably up to 1,000 now, that you have access to that you can cook a meal for your whole family that is high protein, that everybody's going to love, kid friendly, because I have two very picky little boys, you know, that are going to fuel you. And then you're going to hit your numbers, but you're not making a separate meal for yourself. And so it's a more of a sustainable approach because instead of like saying, I have to eat this certain way and the rest of the family is eating something else, no, I'm taking the whole family on a healthy course and we're all eating healthy, high protein, high fiber meals and filling ourselves. And I'm hitting my weight loss goals and it's filling my whole family. And so it becomes fun because then you start to eat differently and you're like, oh, I just have to make this one meal and it's going to work for everyone.
Yeah. Now, with your background in oncology as well, where you kind of started off things, have you tied that into nutrition and the things that we're putting into a body as well? Or have you separated that because you're more on the other side of fitness, where it's to do with working out and behavior and all that as well? Or are you tying those two together?
Believe it or not, a lot of the stuff that I learned in oncology, especially the nutrition side of things, does carry into what I'm doing today. Because, like, when you have cancer, for example, they encourage you not to have sugar because sugar kind of fuels cancer. And so believe it or not, little nuggets of it do carry over, not a lot. Uh,
Yeah.
I've worked with nutritionists when people went through cancer, especially when I was doing my clinical rotations. And I did peek at it, and it's a very bland diet. I'll be honest. They kind of take everything out of it, but still some of that knowledge from, like, how to fill our bodies, like, at the end of the day, like, if you think about it, we all started as cavemen, cavewomen, we all were the meat type carnivores. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I see a ton of people doing the carnivore diet and stuff like that. I I mean, I'm not against it, but at the end of the day, you do need carbs. Carbs are like your gas tank. Like, if you think of it this way, like, when you put diesel in like a gas car, it's gonna run sluggish. It's not gonna run right. But when you put gasoline, the right type of gasoline in a car, it's gonna run smooth, great, ultimate. So you do need carbs, but it balances out. Like, everybody's unique. Our bodies are unique. How the type of like the balance between protein, carbs, and fats, they're all different for every single person. And so when you start to fuel yourself correctly, it's just like this whole physical shift, but also mental shift. Like,
Yeah.
you start to mentally start to notice that you're unstoppable. You start to push your own boundaries. And that's the cool side of mental health, is because that's why I went and got certified. So I did get certified, and it's called through NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. I got certified as a wellness coach. And a wellness coach is like stress management, nutrition, environmental, mental changes. And so that certification goes more into like the science behind what, fueling ourselves and that physical exertion, and how you really create this longevity for yourself. Um, One of the posts I did recently, I don't know if you saw it, Paul, is I said, I talked about, like, hey, if you go to a doctor and they instantly prescribe you pills before asking about your nutrition and exercise, then you have a pill pusher, a dealer basically, and not a doctor. And I got a lot of feedback from that post, because a lot of people are like, you're right. Like, you know, everybody should start with their nutrition and exercise. Like, you can
Yeah.
cure so many things. Like, I've had so many clients go through FarmFit Training that were dependent on antidepressant pills.
Well,
And the next thing you know it, halfway through the program, they're off it. Because again, they're feeling their body, they're changing their chemical profile, they're creating muscles, they're doing something for them, are taking charge of their life. And it kind of goes back to that I was saying, like, do you want to be the 80-year-old in a wheelchair when you go to the nursing home? Or do you want to be that 80-year-old that's dependent? Like, there was that really cool reel floating around about this guy, like, lifting weights because he wanted to lift his daughter. This
yeah, I have seen that. Yeah, yeah.
It's just the coolest thing, like that commercial, hands down, whoever made that commercial, best puts it in perspective. But thinking like, wait a minute, like, I wanna be him, like, I wanna be active in life, I wanna be that person that ages, like fine wine, and be able to do whatever I want, and have that flexibility when I'm older, instead of being bound into a wheelchair or a nursing home. I want that longevity aspect.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So for folks that are listening to this, what's the biggest head smack that you want to give them that is a misunderstanding of whether it's mental health and wellness, physical, or nutritional? What's the big head smack you want to leave them with?
Start today. Honestly, like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just like when I started, I launched FarmFit Training, like, I didn't have all the tools. Like, I didn't have these fancy pieces of equipment. I didn't have, I went and figured it out. I think the biggest head smack I want to leave them today is, it doesn't have to be perfect. Um, just take that first step, and, doing those three simple things that we talked about, water, protein every meal, you know, um, you know, give your longest investment. Like, we invest so much time into our business, our family, for in our case, we invest a lot into our land that we farm. Don't forget, like, hey, if you're not around later in life to see all those investments that you're putting in, like, now's the time to start investing in yourself and taking that 15 to 25 minutes to just start. It doesn't have to be pretty. Maybe your squats are going to look horrible and you can't even get close to the ground. Again, just start.
Yeah. What are three? You mentioned the plank. What are two other exercises that somebody can start today on their fitness journey?
Uh, You can do a squat. Squats are something super simple, and, like, you can do it anytime. If you're just sitting there at your desk, like, let's say I'm at my desk a lot because my business, is online, so I'm doing a lot of stuff like that. Sometimes I'll push my chair away and just do 10 squats, you know?
Yeah.
Something simple like that. Um, Another movement, walking. I know some fitness coaches don't like, say walking is not exercise, but if you're 300 pounds, again, body weight, any body weight movement is considered, calisthenic movement.
Yeah.
It's a workout. So instead of, taking the elevator, if you're in an office, take the stairs. Be that one, you know.
Well, and if you're drinking a gallon of water, you're going to do a lot of walking too, right? So
So that piece that got yeah, yeah, when I do that. So yeah, just be intentional is the biggest thing. And it doesn't like, again, if you don't have weight equipment, if you don't have anything like that, your body is a great piece of weight. Like, push-ups. We talked about push-ups. A lot of people can't do push-ups, believe it or not.
yeah,
A lot of women, but also men. There's a lot of men out there that don't have correct form when it comes to push-ups. And so I love it
yeah,
being able to teach them how to do a proper push-up because it's
yeah,
cool. Because once they learn it, they're like, wow, I was doing push-ups like totally wrong. Like,
yeah. So what is the right way to do a push-up?
well, I do a tricep push-up because, for women, we don't have a stronger chest muscles compared to men. And so for me, it's easier to do more of a tricep type push-up where you tuck your elbows in and you have your arms even with your chest, and then you just push up against. And that for us women, again, our upper body strength, like, majority of our strength is actually in our legs. So, like, if you ever leg wrestle a woman, get ready. Like, well, for powerhouses, Nick was where, you know?
Yeah,
But for men, a lot of your upper body strength is in your arms. So you can go a little wider stance, like a 45-degree angle, and do a push up. And it'll work more of your back, your chest muscles, it'll work not only your arms. So for women, I would recommend like a tricep push up.
yeah,
Especially when they get going, because again, they're gonna notice, and don't be afraid to start at your knees. You know,
yeah,
like as long as you engage your core, you squeeze not only your glutes, your legs, and when we're talking about engaging your core, think of someone like almost punching you in the stomach, how you get really tight, when anticipation, like, you're like, "Oh," you squeeze all your muscles. That's what it's supposed to feel like when you engage your core, is it's like someone's about ready to knock you in your stomach and you're like, squeeze all those muscles. So
right.
if you maintain that, a push-up would be a great calisthenic workout that anybody can do anywhere.
So you mentioned doing a push-up instead of being on your toes and straight. You mentioned being on your knees and doing it like that for somebody just starting out
Yeah,
is an
so
option.
you basically put your knees together. So you put your knees like so a push-up, you're in plank form. We talked about plank form in this video. So before you do that, you just drop your knees. Again, you're still engaging your back. Your back is lined. You're still in a straight line, but your knees are on the ground. And then some women will cross their feet. I don't recommend it. Just to hold your feet tight together because then you'll be engaging your leg muscles properly. And you want to be at least a 45 angle, and so then when you go down, make sure you get your chest all the way to the ground, all the way to
Yeah,
the ground. A lot of people don't get their chest completely to the ground and they count that as a push up. I'm like, no, you got to get all the way to the ground and then just push back up.
yeah, yeah. Well, Amanda, this has been amazing, and congrats on launching this in a short time and then having such international success with it. That's really amazing. And so, if people want to learn more about this, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm actually FarmFit Mama, so it's FarmFit and then it's MOMMA on social. I changed my handle to that, believe it or not, in 2020.
Right.
While. So they can find me on every social media platform. And then we do have a website, which we do have, if they're interested in macros, we have a macro calculator on my website that they can check out. And then we also have a survey they can go through. And that's just farmfitmama.com as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. This has been wonderful. And hopefully, somebody's been encouraged not only in starting their business lean if they need to, with just lifting not chickens and goats, but lifting things around around you. Just use the tools that you have around you for whatever you're launching. Don't feel that you have to have everything in place before you can launch something. Sometimes you can just do stuff bare bones, and that's amazing. And also, when it comes to your niche, you'd be surprised, for Amanda, it was simply farmers and fitness. And for some people, they would have been like, well, it might not be enough, but surprisingly, there was enough in that space. And so I want to encourage you guys with that. And then also with your fitness and with your health, definitely reach out to Amanda at farmfitmama.com and see how you guys might be able to connect and how she might be able to help you with your fitness journey as well. Thank you, Amanda. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Head Smack podcast. We've shared some candid stories and life-changing ideas. And now it's your time to act. First, take bold action on just one idea and see how your life can radically change. Secondly, whatever platform you're listening to this on, please rate it, share it, and leave a comment. Let us know where this episode impacted you. I appreciate you giving me your time, and don't forget to join us for our next Misfit conversation.